What's going on, guys? Chuck's back with another awesome Blu-ray purchase, and today we're going to take a look at recent release from Paramount, the Star Trek: The Next Generation 4K Blu-ray releases. Now, if you go back a few videos back, you can see where I talked about the 4K release of the original series films. And similar to that, what Paramount did was they actually released this in two different formats, two different versions. There is the actual box set of these four films, and then they release the four individually. Now, they weren't able to do the double dip in the box as it were, like they did with the original series. Or if you recall, the original series, only the first four released in the box set as in the 4K, and then which seemed kind of weird, combining to the whole six, and then later on they released all six in a 4K box, which upset many people. Well, being there's only four films in the set, they weren't able to pull that little chicanery off. So it came down again for me, do I do the box set or individuals? And similar to my reasoning last time, I went with the individuals because I liked the fact that they had the original poster art on each individual slip. Plus, it makes it more uniform with the rest of the six. Now, with you put them side by side with the first six, they actually look pretty, uniform all the way across. Without further ado, let's take a look at the first one. The first one being, of course, Star Trek Generations, the very first Next Generation film. This is interesting because I remember this is when Star Trek was like really at its, kind of at its apex, maybe. This is, came out about in 1994, I think it was. Yeah, 94. So I remember reading somewhere at the time, because this was a time when Next Generation was ending. Deep Space Nine had like a year, in their second season of Deep Space Nine, I think it was, second or third. And of course, they're doing the film. I think there's one point where they were filming the last episode of Next Generation, which all good things. They were doing pre-production on Generations, and they were setting up for they're working on season, I believe it's 3 of DS9 all at the same time. So it was really, really crazy around that time. This is a film, I remember seeing the trailer for this. I can't remember what movie we went seeing, but the trailer for this was very excited for this. Because it came as a surprise. This is before you knew trailers were online and all that, and they just kind of went there, and there it was. And I remember the whole audience just, the minute they showed Kirk and Picard together, and the whole audience just cheered and was totally excited. I also remember this poster. I actually used to have this poster somewhere, and this was interesting because the very first issue of Cinescape magazine was one I used to collect regularly for when it first came out. But a lot of movie news, behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. The very first issue of that actually had this as their cover, this poster. And this is a really cool poster. I used to have this poster, and I always thought it'd been pretty cool to get this signed by Patrick Stewart and William Shatner. Of course, that never happened. But, and like I said, this is a film I saw probably 4 or 5 times in a theater. I really liked it a lot. And of course, I know a lot of people, I don't know what their opinions on it are. I mean, it's kind of mixed. You can tell the film, you can tell it's definitely a transitional film. As you watch the sets alone, put this down. Watching it, the costumes, always threw me, because you have Next Generation era costumes mixed in with DS9 era costumes, and they're all blended together. It seems kind of strange. Obviously, you have the Enterprise D. This is right off the heels of the show. It probably just ending, several months before the film was released. So it's, really, it just feels like, it definitely feels like a rushed production. Of course, I actually have an original script somewhere that included every original series cast member, and there's a lot of different things throughout the script. It's a script that needs rework. Of course, they couldn't get the original cast members. They narrowed it down to Walter Koenig, James Doohan, and William Shatner for several reasons. But I think for what you got, I think it's very, very much Star Trek to me. I always liked Generations. It has that big epic space kind of, thing. The Nexus is, it's not really a bad. I mean, there are bad guys. You've got Soren and the Duras sisters, but the you have a something cosmic that's affecting the series. Kind of like in the original Most Picture, you've got Vidra. You don't have just a bad villain. It's something in space that they're trying to explore and figure out. But granted, the Nexus is more or less kind of just, I guess, a MacGuffin for the film. Really, and it's really about Picard dealing with loss and other things like that, and Kirk dealing again different versions of Kirk and Picard dealing with losses of different kind, how they learn to reconcile and deal with those. But you've got a lot of fun things in that, and it's a movie I really enjoyed. But so here's the set, and again, these are very similar to the original series 4K sets. The black slip covers with the silver, which is it makes everything really pop. Only difference is the artwork for the Next Generation films actually expand the whole slipcover, whereas the original series were kind of a smaller, just kind of center where had like a star field surrounding the back, the poster, but still pretty cool. So again, there's a look at that. And here's your back with all your special features, and I think a lot of these are poured over from the special edition DVD sets and probably previous Blu-ray releases of the film, along with a few new things added on here. And like the original series film sets, there are quotes on here. Let's do this one. The clown can stay, but the Ferengi in the gorilla suit has to go. Not the quote I would use. I mean, it's a fine line. Of course, Data recalling the punchline for a joke from 7 years prior. I think I would have went with something more. They say time, or no, they say time is the fire in which we burn. Something like that. One of Soren's great lines. I always liked his Malcolm McDowell's speeches. So, and nothing fancy, no reverse artwork. You've got digital code and then 4K Blu-ray. Pretty simple, pretty cut dry, and they're all pretty much going to be that way. Nothing fancy other than that. So, moving on to the next one, which is, I think, many consider to be the best of the Next Generation films, and that, of course, is Star Trek: First Contact. And this is a really pretty cover. I like how that purple really blends with the black. Purple and black, my two favorite colors. This really blends really well. My history with this, I used to have this poster too. This is a fun movie. I like the idea of going back and meeting Zefram Cochrane, who's such a big character in Star Trek lore, and the idea of going back. Time travel is always a big Star Trek trope, and it works well for to save the whales. Now we're trying to save the Federation and hold Earth from the Borg. And this film really did a good job of making the Borg scary again, and they really upped the design on the Borg, which was really awesome. And of course, it famously introduced the Borg Queen, who would go on to be a major villain, a recurring villain in Star Trek Voyager, and even showed up again in season 2 of Star Trek Picard. So, of course, played by Alice Krige for the first time, and I think Alice Krige played the Borg Queen on the series finale of Voyager, Caretaker. I think there's only another time she played the Borg Queen. And of course, this also introduces the Enterprise E, after the destruction of Enterprise D in Generation, spoiler alert. And this was also Jonathan Frakes, I believe, his film directing debut. Much like, you go back to Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, where Leonard Nimoy would be his film directing debut, directing that film. Now, I think Jonathan Frakes had directed episodes, I believe, of the series prior to this, but this was his first theatrical directorial effort. So, there's that. Here's your back. Again, all your special features. The quote on this one: "I am the beginning, the end, the one who is many. I am the Borg." And that's a good line. Of course, that's a good line. But this has the famous Picard line, the line must be drawn here, this far, no further, and I will make them pay for what they've done. But mostly the line must be drawn here, this far, no further. And obviously with much more gravitas and that ability from Patrick Stewart than what I'm delivering. But that is probably the famous line, the confrontation with Alfred Woodard, who was very fun in this also. And James Cromwell is very good as a reluctant Zefram Cochrane. So, your slip, again, oops, pop it up. Same back and front. Digital code, 4K Blu-ray. Kind of redundant, but, for complete's sake. Moving on to a film I enjoy, but I think it's definitely coming down from the action-packed film that was Star Trek First Contact. You go down to the more philosophical film in Star Trek Insurrection, which I don't think many people really enjoyed. Again, Jonathan Frakes directing again, which is, again, funny because you go back thinking her name was directed Star Trek 3, then he came on and immediately directed Star Trek 4. Frakes directed First Contact, now he's directing Insurrection. And this is the film, again, it's coming off the heels of the action and the suspense of First Contact, and Insurrection really slows things down. It's more like a typical Star Trek The Next Generation episode. You're dealing with a shady Federation people, like the Admiral played by Anthony Zerbe. You've got oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank now on the name. Give me a minute here if I can find it. Probably not. It'll hit me later on. F. Murray Abraham. There it is. F. Murray Abraham as the main villain, and with I guess basically Star Trek finds the Fountain of Youth, and the repercussions of that, and what it means for the universe, and how far do we interfere? Again, there's a lot of philosophical questions, and where that is the heart of Star Trek. I think when Star Trek is really its best when it's it's asking these questions. For a theater audience for 2 hours, people want stuff blown up. That's what can I say? That's basically it. So this one was not as favorable as First Contact, but again, it's got some good moments, and I enjoy it. I think a lot of the cast, most of the cast has some good. Michael Dorn has a lot of good moments as Worf. Sorry, there's the back and better look at that. And of course, but it's Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner really are the focuses of all these Next Generation movies more than anybody else. The rest of the cast kind of gets maybe a moment here and there, but for the most part, are kind of relegated to background. There's back or front and back. Digital code, 4K Blu-ray. Broken record. The quote on this one is, "Our guests have arrived. They're eating the floral arrangements." Not great. Off the top of my head, I can't find or can't think of a better quote, which tells you, it's nothing really. As much as I enjoy Insurrection, nothing really sticks out quote-wise. Or except maybe, definitely feeling aggressive tendency, sir. That's probably the one I could really think of. Again, Michael Dorn had some really great lines as he's going through Klingon puberty. Now, final film, and this was the last theatrical film for the Next Generation, kind of their last hurrah, as it were. And it didn't do very well. And I think this kind of put an end to Star Trek films for quite a while until J.J. Abrams did his reboot of Star Trek in 2009, I think it was. And that, of course, is Star Trek Nemesis. I don't know much to say about this one. Obviously, it's got a very dark tone. I think it's probably a darker tone than First Contact, although First Contact has a lot of horror elements to it. Um, but at the same time, there's a lot of finality in this film. We're dealing with the wedding of Riker and Troy. And again, spoiler alerts if you've never seen these movies 20, 30 years later. But obviously, the final result of Data, that the Enterprise crew is splitting up. Riker's getting his own command, the Titan, and of course, events. Well, not really events in this. I'll say you can almost say in some way. No, maybe not. But I was thinking because this deals heavily with Romulans, obviously, and you have Rogue Romulan and the Remans. Of course, this is the was it Tom Hardy. I think it's the first time I'd ever seen him. He's of course a big actor now, known for Venom. He just did the last Mad Max film. He's an Oscar-nominated actor. Bane and Dark Knight Rises. This is the first time I'd ever seen Tom Hardy. He's playing Shinzon, the main antagonist with a dark connection to Captain Picard. I think it's a good performance. What hurts this film a lot is, I think a lot of people agree, is probably Stuart Baird, the director. Nothing against Stuart Baird as director. I'm sure, he's done a lot of. I can't think of anything, but I'm sure he's a competent director. I know he's a very competent editor. He edited Superman the movie. He worked a lot with Richard Donner. But I think the problem was he did not know Star Trek. And I don't know if he really cared to know Star Trek. He just basically making a film, which is a shame because a lot of people said you have Jonathan Frakes right there. The cast, you can ask him, and I don't think they really. I think the cast really felt that Stewart just didn't really care. I liken it to maybe not to the same degree, but like something like Freddy versus Jason. You've got two characters with a lot of history, and you bring in, you have a lot of history trying to merge those two characters together, and you bring in someone like Ronnie Yu, who didn't know anything about Freddy, didn't know anything about Jason, just made a movie and did whatever he wanted to do. And as fun as that movie is, it shows that he didn't know what's going on. And the same thing we said for Nemesis. There's a lot of good. I mean, there's something. It's not horrible. It's not my favorite of the Next Generation films, but there's something in there. But again, I think it just misses a lot of the Star Trek heart in some places that, again, someone who would know Star Trek would probably piece in there more. And I don't think Stuart Baird really tried or even cared, honestly. And there's some, I mean, it could have been a better send off for the crew. Because the Next Generation crew cast is huge to Star Trek. They basically revived Star Trek. In 1987, when the Next Generation began, they were coming up the heels of the Star Trek 4, which came out in '86 and was huge, the best, highest grossing of the original series films, and it was like Star Trek was hot, so that's when Gene Roddenberry tried to do Next Generation, and obviously try to get his baby back, as it were, because he'd been pretty much bumped from the original series films. He wanted some kind of control, and Next Generation really took the baton, and when a lot of people thought it would fail, myself included, I was like, Next Generation, what's that? Let's not. I don't know these characters. It's kind of weird, but it proved for 7 years that Star Trek had could survive, and of course, Next Generation, you get DS9, which is my personal favorite Star Trek of all, which led to Voyager, which led to Enterprise, and of course, then by then you get Star Trek fatigue, and we're kind of in a bit of a renaissance with starting with the J.J. Abrams reboots, which they've kind of found right now. But now I guess the Paramount Plus series, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Picard. Just I'm sure Prodigy. There's so many. It's it's popular again. But again, all that as much as you want to say all because of the original series, which is true. I mean, without the original series, there is no Star Trek. But we gotta admit, Next Generation gave it a second life that's still living to this day. And this could have been a better ending for them. And I think that's why I'm really enjoying season 3 of Picard, because I feel like it's nice. I think those characters are getting better closure, even though it's been 30 years. But I think it's a little better closure for them than the one we got in Nemesis now. So here's the cover. I do like this image, but again, Picard and Data are the really focus of these movies. I think Brent Spiner got second billing, where he was billed in alphabetical order in the TV series, but the movies he got second billing over Jonathan Frakes, I believe. Frakes may have got second, and Spiner may have gotten third, but I'm pretty sure Spiner got second billing after Patrick Stewart. Here's your back, your quote for this one. I think it's time to try some unsafe velocities. Again, I've got nothing to compare it to because I don't remember Nemesis well enough to pick lines out. So maybe that's as good as any. Up front, back, digital code, 4K Blu-ray, you know the drill. So, that is it. So now, the first 10 Star Trek films are released in 4K. I don't believe the new the Star Trek reboot trilogy is put in 4K. I don't think, but I imagine if they're not, they're probably not too far behind. Although it's hard to say. I think it works better for the newer films, or the older films, excuse me. Because new films are all digital, they all look great now, but I'm sure they'll probably put it out in 4K because they can throw it out there and make a couple bucks. But it's good to see these first 10 really get good treatments. I really enjoy all those movies, and again, they look good, all stacked on a shelf together in very uniform set almost. And it's, again, I think it's just it's nice that these films are getting such good treatment, and I was really thrilled going back to the original series that the motion picture got such excellent treatment, because it's a film that's not many people. Oh, I think in hindsight that film's definitely kind of got a renaissance. People are reassessing it and realizing how important, especially with the director's cut they've done on fixing it up in the 4K. But it's nice to see all these films getting these nice 4K editions, and they're gonna look beautiful and sound great. So, but I imagine that new Trek, Kelvin Universe Trek, whatever you want to call it, J.J. Abrams Trek, will probably getting the treatment if it hasn't already. I don't believe they are in 4K. So we'll see what happens in the future. But that is it for now. So if you enjoy this, click thumbs up, share, subscribe, leave me a comment below. Let me know what your favorite Star Trek film is, what your favorite Star Trek series is. Do you even like Star Trek? Like I said, personally, for me, my favorite Star Trek film, I enjoy them all. I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek. Honestly, I would probably say I enjoy Star Trek probably more than Star Wars. And I like Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars. But something about the history of Star Trek, I think it's probably because it's easier for me to follow than Star Wars. As far as, especially when it came to EU, of course, that's a whole other thing in itself, and both their expanding universes are just crazy. But I've always enjoyed, I think because there's so many different variations of Star Trek, which I guess Star Wars is turning that way now. You've got different variations of where before it was just Star Wars, just movies. And that was it, where Star Trek had different TV shows, different characters, and it kind of branched out. I think that's probably, or Star Trek, that's probably why I liked it, where it's more history. You could buy a book, the chronology of it. There are always episodes, there's so much more than just, at the time, the 3 movies before, even the 6, when the prequels came out of Star Wars. But now Star Wars is becoming that with different series and characters, and they're really branching out. But I still have something about Star Trek that really I think sticks with me a little more than Star Wars. And again, it's coming from someone who was a huge Star Wars fan as a kid. I still am a big Star Wars fan. But back to what I was saying. I think Wrath of Khan is probably my favorite because obviously I was his favorite, but it's the first Star Trek I ever saw. Period. So that's a big one. And for Next Generation's movies, I think probably it's a toss up between First Contact and Generations. I like Generations a lot. But what can you say? And of course, like I said, my favorite Star Trek series is DS9. I hands down say that is the best Star Trek series ever. Hands down. I've rambled enough. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment, all that good stuff. Until next time, this is Chuck saying I will see you on the other side. Live long and prosper.